Me now to weigh in is Republican Representative Darrell Issa of California. He joins us from D.C. Boy, this is outrageous. I mean, you know, this takes the cake. I mean, using our bailout money, which probably never should have been used in the first place, to lobby to get more of our bailout money.
Well, you're absolutely right. But, of course, Freddie and Fannie were lobbying Congress for their very existence for years and very successfully. And we have other scandals. The stimulus package certainly appears as though lobbyists were able to get special treatment for the national parks and lots of other special interest groups. As you know, some of these groups had their money pulled out, but it's still an $800+ billion package filled with nothing but spending. And obviously there's some tax cuts, and we'll leave those aside, but the spending is mostly spending, and particularly disturbing, most of the spending cannot take place in the first 2 years. So with any luck, we should be back into good times by the time that money gets spent.
All right, now you jumped right in from TARP to talking about the stimulus bill, or so-called stimulus bill, which people are thinking I'm nuts. I carry this around with me everywhere. They think I'm totally obsessed, like Markopoulos was with Madoff. But it's just so fascinating to read all this pork and to have Democrats, still some with a straight face, saying that this is job creation. There is one case, though, that does kind of connect both what the TARP lobbying that we were talking about and this, and that's the case of Gerard Salami. Now, this is a guy who works for an organization called Clearwire, and he's apparently been working with the Obama transition team, advising them on digital conversion. And take it from there, Congressman.
Well, you know, what makes this so sleazy is I think the Obama transition team was probably naive in letting the fox into the hen house. This is an individual who, although he's been listed as affiliated with Sprint, really is a separate company, one that's not doing very well, whose stock price has gone from $32 a share down to about $4, and he has a lot of shares. But he's also a well-paid executive vice president there. This is a company that uses the new spectrum, and yet he, behind closed doors, lobbied to delay making new spectrum available. Inherently, something was wrong in what he was lobbying for. Either he wanted to give those who were already up and running an advantage, or he wanted to disadvantage those waiting for spectrum.
Okay, let me just put a fine point on
it.
Let me just put a fine point on it. This is an administration, Obama administration, which has said we're going to wipe out lobbying working within this administration, and they use this guy. We don't know exactly how, but the D.C. Examiner wrote a story that said that he's on the transition. He's advising the transition team before they came into power on issues about connectability and the digital conversion, et cetera. He's a former chief of staff of Congressman Ed Markey, and he is essentially working as a lobbyist for Clearwire, correct?
He absolutely is, and much more clever than a typical lobbyist, because he got at the table as though he was essentially, not essentially, but a consultant to help them understand this. And he managed to convince President Obama, when he was still President-elect Obama, to do exactly one thing that he said he wasn't going to do, which he said it was one president at a time. The one statement he made was the digital transition delay. He did that while he was still president-elect. So this was an amazing piece of lobbying to get President Obama to do something even before he was president that flies in the face of all common sense.
Now, I'm looking in here. I'm going through this bill, which I should know by memory by now. Of course, it's 700 pages. But here's the $2,825 million broadband deployment grant program. Here's another program that has $600 million to educate people on digital conversion. Could this guy also have been involved in that part of the legislation?
I don't have any question that he has deep roots here in Congress and in the majority. What's particularly disconcerting is that we fought to get reasonable amounts of money for the underserved and those who were economically challenged to be able to get these subsidized converter boxes, when basically it would only take a matter of a few $1 million, 60 or 70 million, to satisfy everybody in the backlog we come up with these numbers, $2 billion, $650 million, as though we ever needed these. These are ideas that were rejected over years of debate as unnecessary.
Yeah, if that's not pork, I don't know what is. Stay with us, Congressman. We want to bring in our panel, Rick Newman of U.S. News and World Report. In San Francisco, Victoria Barrett from Forbes. And in Orlando, Gary Kaltbaum, host of Investors Edge radio show. Gary, so this administration says they don't want lobbyists. We're not going to have any lobbyists. And this guy is apparently helping to write some legislation for pork.
Yeah, no lobbyists except that guy. Look, this is a cesspool that has been going on for decades. It's never ending. These lobbyists work in government. They leave. They go and lobby their best buddies, make a bunch of money. Then they go back into government. It is a never-ending chain of events, and you see what's coming of this. This is no surprise to me. And Obama, I think, spoke a little too quick about how good things are going to be in his administration.
Well, and Victoria, we're seeing it all over. We see that the big banks that are getting the big bailouts were spending hundreds of millions lobbying for those bailouts, and you get what you pay for.
You get more money when you lobby, it turns out. Look, what bugs me here isn't so much that you have lobbyists in Washington. Washington has always had lobbyists. You want private sector involvement in the government, and there is potentially a conflict there, but I think a lot of people in business. Well, yes, often, but I think you want business people involved in Washington, and that is going to be a conflict.
So how do you resolve that?
The problem is that the government is deciding winners and losers right now.
Victoria, I got to move on because I got to get Rick in here. How do you resolve that conflict?
I'm thinking of that statement in the fine print in the prospectus. Past performance doesn't guarantee future returns, right? So that 259,000% return is for the last 4 months. I have a feeling there's going to be a reversal of fortune, especially for the banks going forward. We know that the CEOs are going to see a diminished return in their paychecks with this $500,000 pay cap, right?
Well, Congressman,
waiting to see some of these companies give back.
Congressman, is there anything that you can do, a lone congressman crying in the wilderness of all these lobbyists, to stop this?
Well, first of all, the most important thing we can do as the minority is shed light on these failures. President Obama, I think, genuinely tried to clean up his incoming transition team and his cabinet, but he's failed. And part of what we have to do is, and you're doing it, is shed light on it so that he can quickly make these changes. Look, I didn't vote for this president, but I will tell you, I've been impressed that at least he has not stubbornly stuck to people in some cases that needed to get out of the way to make room for people who weren't tainted. I wish he would do it 100% of the time, and I certainly wish he would have reconsidered this DTV decision at least until he could evaluate what the recommendation would have been if there hadn't been a fox in the henhouse.
All right. And Tom Daschle's example of, apparently they were listening at least that far. Darrell, Issa, and we'll hear more from our panel coming up. Darrell, Issa, thank you very much for being here.